African.
At long last, the battle has ended. And thus, Ghana, your beloved country, is free forever.
Ghana's illustrious leader, Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, led Ghana to independence from the British colonialism on March 6, 1957.
Dr. Kwame Nkrumah came to the Gold Coast in December 1947 and brought a new method of organization into the independence struggle, which actually frightened the colonial authorities. This led to him being imprisoned after he had declared positive action, and it enabled him to bring together most of the people of these countries, which culminated in the creation of the modern state of Ghana. This actually frightened the imperialists and the colonial authorities, because it was a new method of organization which was being replicated elsewhere in Africa, and which led to the liberation of other African states, both in the 50s as well as in 1960, when 17 African states became independent. And of course, he helped the states of Guinea and Mali when they were under aggression by the erstwhile colonial state France, for having dared opt for independence instead of being part of the French.
And supporters of the growing movement for Africa's liberation and unity. It is good for our cause to have a periodic meeting of this kind to examine our position in the great struggle to rid Africa completely and forever of imperialism and its handmaidens, colonialism and neocolonialism.
Again, in December of 1958, there was the All Africa People's Conference, which brought about all the liberation movements and freedom fighters from all over African states to come to Ghana to have a meeting, which culminated in the creation of the Bureau of African Affairs, which gave material support to and refuge to the liberation fighters of the African states.
This mid-20th century is Africa's. This decade is the decade of African independence. Forward then to independence. To independence now. Tomorrow, the United States of Africa.
Domestically, as soon as he became leader of government business in 1951, the first budget for a colonial entity within the British Empire was created for the Gold Coast. He also launched the 5-year development plan subsequently, which brought about unprecedented infrastructural development in our country. One of the first infrastructural development in our country which he brought about was the building of the Adomi Bridge, and its political significance and the essence of it was to make a loud statement that the Gold Coast colony and Transvolta Togoland were one and indivisible, and which was the basis for the creation of the modern state of Ghana. He also built health facilities. Example, he expanded the Kolebu Hospital. He built the Okonfa-Noche Hospital, and lots of other health facilities. Health campaigns to fight against certain common diseases which were widespread in our country, like yaws, elephantiasis, guinea worm, were launched. Smallpox as well. And these were all eliminated in our country within a short time. And this was all even before independence. Adult mass literacy campaign in order to ensure that both information and literacy in numeracy and reading was taken to the countryside, to the mass of the people of our country. Dr. Kwame Nkrumah didn't just stop at that. He looked at the workers' front and helped the Trade Union Congress to consolidate, so that by 1958, the first Industrial Relations Act was passed. Most house trade unions, that's little trade unions, were consolidated into big unions. They were given the check-off system, and they were given the right to strike. And of course, the minimum wage was introduced in order to help low-income workers of a country. When you get to the agricultural scene, the Cocoa Development Bill, which of course was also used to get money to finance most of the development of this country in the 1950s, was passed. And the Cocoa Marketing Board was nationalized. And a massive extension service to service the cocoa industry was undertaken in our country. It led to, for example, the fight against the swollen shoot disease, which was destroying cocoa, the mainstay of our country, economy, by replanting it and giving all sorts of incentives to the cocoa farmer. So when you talk within the social sphere too, theoretically, Kwame Nkrumah made great achievements. He initiated African personality. Why was the African personality initiated? During the slave trade era, white supremacists in Europe and elsewhere had brought about the theory of racial supremacy. And that had been a weapon which had been used by colonialism in order to consolidate their rule over the African. There was a need for the African to regain his confidence, to understand his history, and to know where he had come from as far as the creation of civilization. And the works of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, especially on African personality, just opened the path towards that. Again, the young pioneers were created to be able to enable the young people of modern Ghana then to be disciplined, to have love of country, to have love of work, and to be able to live in peace amongst each other. Other achievements of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, especially economically, which sent shivers amongst the colonial people, was his attempt to ensure that the model of development changed drastically from we being hewers of wood and drawers of water and suppliers of raw materials or primary products to the metropolis, for us to enable us to be able to create a system where we could add value to our primary products in order to ensure that what we imported will stop and be able to manufacture those imports here. Within a very short period of his rule, over 300 factories in all categories were created. And the essence of his building of factories was quite interesting. One factory he built, which was 2 factories, yes, or 3 factories which he built, which were linked economically and which had political and national significance, was his creation of the Bolgatanga meat factory, which was near to a source of raw materials, that is cattle, in the north, in Bolgatanga. Yeah, the hide is brought from Bolgatanga meat factory to the Aveime tannery. It is tanned and cured and taken to Kumasi and turned into shoes at the Kumasi shoe factory, thus linking 3 distinct geographical areas of Ghana into one economic zone. Other factories, an industrial enclave in Tema was built. Real housing was built in Tema, in Accra, in the Awudome, elsewhere, cantonments, areas. They were all built for the workers who had to work in these factories and had to work as administrative staff of the government. Dr. Kwame Nkrumah's flagship economic project was the Akosombo Dam. And it was all-encompassing because it provided water, it provided electricity, it provided fish, and it provided water for irrigation in agriculture for the people of this country, as well as transportation between the north and the south of this country. And that was a breakthrough. And indeed, it is a paradox that he opened the Akosombo Dam for it to start supplying electricity in January 1966. And the imperialists made sure that by February 24th, 1966, he had been subverted and thrown out of power so that they could truncate the full development of the Volta River projects. He opened up the country by extending the railways, by building roads where they did not exist, and other infrastructure projects as well as economic projects. Dr. Kwame Nkrumah did not put industries only in the southern part of our country or only in Accra. He created industrial enclaves in the western region. He built factories in the central region, like the ceramics factory, etc. He built factories in the Brown Hafu region, that's the Wenchi tomato factory, built factories in Kumasi, built factories, as has been indicated, in the northern part of the country, including cotton ginnery factory in Tamale and the factory in Bolgatanga. He built irrigation projects, especially in the north. The Bolgatanga irrigation project and others were all built. Infrastructure-wise, he did not only restrict himself to brick and mortar. The infrastructure of the state's architecture was also rebuilt, because all these things in the colonial era were built on British existing institutions. So they had to be built anew. So the Public Services Commission, the Civil Service, and other institutions, public sector institutions, were built. In his attempt to rebuild the Ghana Army, traitors within the Ghana Army conspired with the CIA of the United States of America, the MI6 of Great Britain, to subvert the works of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. Whilst he was president of the country, he did not restrict himself only to political and economic and social achievements in his own country. He wrote books. He wrote books about the journey which he had embarked upon. And he wrote theoretical books on philosophy, Conscientism, and others. And post-1966, when he went to exile, also wrote books the class struggle in Africa and others before he died. So he actually explained his mission and his works and what he sought to do. The achievements of Dr. Kwame Nkrumah internationally starts with Pan-Africanism, but he went beyond Pan-Africanism when in 1955 at the Bandung Conference in Indonesia, he, Sukarno, Tito, and Nehru of India came together to initiate the non-aligned conference, which was to fight for world peace. He sponsored the World Without a Bomb by fighting against the French imperialist testing of the atomic bomb in the Sahara, and gave refuge to great African intellectuals like W.E.B. Du Bois, George Padmore, and helped the liberation war in Algeria by giving them material support against the French. And the other liberation movements were also helped. He had fantastic relations with the Republic of Cuba, led by Fidel Castro, by meeting Fidel Castro at the United Nations, establishing diplomatic relations with Cuba, and continuing economic and political relations in spite of the United States blockade of the Republic of Cuba. These are some, albeit a small part, of the achievements of the Osagyefo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah.
These monumental achievements of the government of the Convention's People's Party, led by Nkrumah, were designed to improve the standard of living of the people's Ghana and to delink the national economy from the colonial metropolis. Nkrumah's policies were primarily aimed at integrating Ghana into a union of African states, strong enough to resist imperialist machinations to control the resources of Africa. This was seen by Western governments and their intelligence agencies as a threat to their stronghold on Ghana and Africa.
When people talk about the overthrow of Nkrumah, very often it depends on the perspective of either the political commentator involved or the person making the claims. People have adduced a lot of reasons. For example, that there was lack of democracy in the Nkrumah regime, there was shortage of goods. But let's look at these accounts individually. When people talk about lack of democracy, they refer to the fact that the Nkrumah regime was a dictatorial regime, starting from the Republican Constitution of 1960. That gave a lot of powers to the president. And so that there was, that there was no opposition, for example. And the fact that Nkrumah's, the CPP was a single party democracy. And then people also refer to the shortage of goods in the system. In fact, a lot of the countries more or less operated something like economic blockade against Nkrumah. So there was shortage of goods. And Nkrumah once said that if he had known that all Ghanaians wanted was milk and honey to flow in Ghana, he would have done so. Now, for some of us, the real reason why there was a political blockade against Nkrumah was the fact that the CIA for a very long time initiated an opposition, foreign-sponsored opposition, that work day and night to be responsible for the overthrow of Nkrumah. So the fact that a person like Lieutenant General Nkrumah was outside the army, but led the coup and became the head of state, was quite evident that the whole move against Nkrumah was foreign sponsored. And I think there are quite a few accounts that you can make reference to if you go to the Insight newspaper. They've published several accounts that we can make reference to. Right from independence, Nkrumah set about to embark on a massive educational program, so that from 1951 up to 1961, there was a monumental and phenomenal increase in the rate of education. The people who enrolled, Nkrumah was building schools all over the place. So because of this agenda, it was quite clear where the man was going. Nkrumah never had anything. Nkrumah was not operating a Westminster type government as such. There was opposition. But what there wasn't was what people perceived to be a government and then opposition like we have now in the political system. So you will not have a government and a vibrant opposition like you have in Westminster. But Nkrumah had a bigger vision for Africa. And his vision for Africa transcended these immediate things like milk and sardine in the shops. No, Nkrumah was thinking big for Africa. And for him, he thought that these kind of essential commodities do not build a nation. He was thinking big. Now, also let's look at the role of the CIA. Nkrumah, right from the start, the Western powers thought he was conscientizing the African masses, and for that matter, they needed to put a stop to that. And for some of us, that is the real reason why he was undermined by the US, Britain, and France, and so on and so forth. Because the conscientization that was going on, the kind of liberation movement conferences he was holding in Accra, were all seen as threats to the metropolis, and for them they have to put a stop to it.
The plot to overthrow the Nkrumah government was probably hatched long before independence. And the first manifestation of that plot came in 1958, when some police officers and members of the opposition to Nkrumah gathered and organized a coup d'etat which became known as the T-Junction Affair. It was a collaboration between Western intelligence agencies and local lackeys of imperialism. The local lackeys of imperialism could not understand why ordinary people, farmers, women, children, young people and so on, were rallying together to take power from the colonialists and building a new society in which nobody was to be left behind. The local lackeys of imperialism had figured out that if the imperialists left, it would have been their right to assume power. But Nkrumah did not give them that opportunity. Nkrumah mobilized the unemployed, he mobilized the working people, he mobilized market women and so on, and they took power into their own hands and started building a new society in which the equality of citizenship was a cardinal principle. They could not stand for that. The imperialist powers, on the other hand, were also very deeply worried about the example that Ghana was showing. Ghana was deliberately delinking its national economy from the colonial metropolis, and the colonialists could not accept that. The imperialist forces did not want a shining example to the rest of Africa, to countries in Asia, and to countries in Latin America, and they were determined to curtail this experiment. Evidence for this can be found in a telegram which was dispatched by the then British High Commissioner, A.W. Snelling, to his home government, in which he made the point that Nkrumah was making the African too politically conscious, and therefore they had to get rid of him. The declassified documents of the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States of America also attest to this grand conspiracy between the forces of imperialism and local lackeys of imperialism to overthrow the Nkrumah government, to abort the socialist experiment, to abort the creation of a new society in which its people had access to important social services like health, like education, like housing, etc. That was the plot, and that is why the Nkrumah government was overthrown. The Nkrumah government is overthrown primarily because it was setting an example, a shining and golden example for the rest of the world, for the rest of newly independent nations and so on. Of course, we have to understand that one of the key agenda of the Nkrumahist government, the Nkrumah government, was the political and economic integration of Africa. The political and economic integration of Africa was meant to ensure that African people could take control of their own resources and exploit these resources for the benefit of their people. That could not be tolerated, and Nkrumah had to go. And plots were hatched. Of course, before the February 24 coup, 1966, there have been various attempts. I'd already spoken about the T-Junction Affair in 1958. There had been the attempt to assassinate him in his office in the Flagstaff House. There had been the Kolungungu bomb blast. There had been the Accra Stadium grenade attack, and so on. There had been many efforts aimed at assassinating Nkrumah, and all of them had failed. And all of them eventually culminated into the February 24, 1966 coup.
It was on the anniversary of Ghana's Independence Day when a bus transported the selected school children and workers to the venue of the parade, where I was expected to present a flower to Nkrumah. When Nkrumah arrived, he stayed for a few minutes and left. Just about 5 to 10 minutes after Nkrumah's departure, there was a bomb explosion. The explosion lifted me, and the next thing I saw was many people lying on the floor and some screaming.
Mama boy, I'm to say, Mama, can't get a mamma to my fam.
I was then transported to the 37 Military Hospital for treatment. I spent over a year in the hospital and later transferred to Britain for further treatment. Much was done, but they couldn't save my leg. After the bomb explosion, Nkrumah visited and promised that
Nkrumah ka let me say, Mamma no kafa teleti. Can't you know, sir? Bibia was a and I mean, then the way I see. Bibia Matama. Only Palang or Dilanto, no way you run. Okay, I said, be my your home, the me with that. That's no Dilan who many weeks. Nkrumah Gina Horn and Nation, the million I say. I said, my kind of back and say, hey,
but unfortunately, he was overthrown and the compensation never came. I was robbed of my future because some wicked people wanted to kill Nkrumah, and I, amongst other innocent people, had to pay for their crime. Apart from Ignatius Kutwe Champong, no government has ever come to my aid, and I still suffer the pain inflicted on me by the bad people who wanted to overthrow Nkrumah at all cost. The pain in my legs sometimes gets very severe. I had to end my education and lost an opportunity to pursue a career. My whole future was destroyed because of some people's hatred for Nkrumah.
Oh, Kwame Nkrumah, why you? I will have lived with my boy by a mobile. Into my home.
On February 24, 1966, the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States of America and its surrogates in Ghana Police Service and the Ghana Armed Forces overthrew the Nkrumah government in a violent coup.
African Revolution, although there were attempts to truncate it in 1966, and it suffered a setback, a grievous setback in 1960s, has been ongoing. And this is thanks to especially the theoretical and practical works of the Osagyefo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. We take inspiration from his works. And the way forward for us is to study him critically. In studying him, it's indeed not appropriate to just learn his works by rote, but to be able to understand the essence of the struggle he undertook, what he did, how he created the modern state of Ghana, how he tried to economically develop our country and remove us from the orbit of the colonial and post-colonial, that's the imperialist orbit. These are all relevant. The fight against poverty in our country is still relevant because there's mass poverty in our country. People, health has been commodified. If you don't have money and you get sick, you die. But there was free healthcare during Kwame Nkrumah's time. He used the nation's resources to invest in free healthcare, in education, in community development, in creating jobs. Because without jobs, you can't create wealth or reproduce wealth. But now, in our country and in most African countries, there's mass unemployment, there's mass starvation, no food security. How do we solve these things? Do we have to invent the wheel to resolve it? Or do we have to remember that once upon a time we were in that same quagmire, and that Osagyefo came around and preferred ideas, both practical and theoretical, on how we could solve it. So I recommend the study of the Osagyefo, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, to all political left schools, for us to study him, to study his works, to be critical about it, not to appear to just imbibe it by rote, and place it within the 21st century with the goal that in fighting poverty, in fighting for freedom, in fighting against imperialism's voracious appetite for the resources of Africa and the third world, especially of our countries, a way has been shown. Is it not possible to look at it, appraise it, and use it within the context of the 21st century? So I believe Nkrumah is still relevant, but he indeed said that he had lit a torch, and that torch will continue to burn generations after his demise. And indeed, reference is always made to the Osagyefo. His works are so inspiring in whatever sphere of life, or the socio-economic life of African countries and even of the world. World peace is an enduring issue which we must all fight for, and Osagyefo fought for it. There can't be peace without freedom. Indeed, there can't be peace without justice. And that's why he gave us the motto, freedom and justice.
Well, about 20 years ago, the Socialist Forum of Ghana decided to designate February 24th every year as Ghana's Day of Shame. This was deliberately done to enable young people, to enable the people of Africa and Ghana to understand the circumstances leading to the overthrow of the Nkrumah government and to learn important lessons from the betrayal of the African people by the opposition to Nkrumah. This is also meant to draw attention to the rapacious nature of imperialism. This was meant also to draw attention to the exploitative nature of imperialism. And this was meant to draw attention to the fact that imperialism will stop at nothing in order to achieve its objectives. It has used blockade, such as the blockade against Cuba. It has used assassinations, such as the assassination of Patrice Lumumba and Salvador Allende. It has used all kinds of methods, including sometimes the forceful overthrow of democratically elected governments in order to achieve its objective. The declaration of February 24th as Ghana's Day of Shame is to enable all of us to come together to learn the important lessons of the overthrow of the Nkrumah government and to struggle together to make it impossible for such imperialist interventions to succeed anywhere in the world. It's important to recall that after the coup against Nkrumah, many atrocities were committed by police and civilian agents of imperialism and their civilian collaborators. I recall that many leaders of the Convention People's Party which Nkrumah led were arrested and thrown into detention without charge or trial. They were banned from participating in the political processes. A number of them were killed. And I recall the case of Boy Moses, that assistant, that aide of Nkrumah, who was actually captured at the airport and put in a cage and driven around the city of Accra. These agents of imperialism were so destructive that they actually ordered the burning of books about Nkrumah and books written about Nkrumah and all progressive literature. And these books were burnt in bonfires on university campuses and their communities. They hated intellectualism. They even sought to destroy intellectualism. I recall that in 1969 or thereabout, Parliament sat under a certificate of urgency and criminalized the printing and circulation and possession of photographs of Osagyefo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. They sought to destroy every and anything that was progressive. Today, we are continuing in the footsteps of Nkrumah and the Convention People's Party. Today, we are retracing our steps. We, today, are working to build a new Ghana on the basis of social justice and deeper democracy. Today, we have rallied around the Socialist Forum of Ghana, and we are determined to build a united Africa, an Africa whose people are fully integrated in the areas of the economy and in the areas of social development and national politics. We want to build that Africa which was envisaged by Ahmed Sekou. We want to build that Africa, that new Africa, which was envisaged by Modibo Keita, by Patrice Lumumba, and by Kwame Nkrumah. That new Africa will be built. And the observance of February 24 as the Day of Shame should provide us with a platform for examining all the machinations of the forces of imperialism and neocolonialism in order to chart the way forward to that new Africa in which no child will go to bed on an empty stomach.
55 years after the unjustified overthrow of the Nkrumah government, the problems of Africa continue to multiply. Africa's resources continue to be owned by multinational corporations from the metropolitan countries and are exploited largely to improve their balance sheets. Access of the masses to such social services as health, education, and housing continues to decline. The struggle to liberate Ghana and Africa from the clutches of neo-colonial exploitation and domination continues unabated. Join the Socialist Forum of Ghana, SFG, to push the Nkrumahist agenda forward.